Bam! How's it going, guys? Token Vaping. So today's review is not actually on a flavor. Today I'm actually doing a review on a new tank that I have been hearing a lot about and I wanted to try for myself because I have become a really big fan of the company and this line of tanks. It is the Aspire Cleito EXO, EXO, XO, and you can check them out at, it is aspiresig.com is the main website, and I mean you can find these available pretty much on any website that sells, you know, vaping hardware, things like that. I wanted to try this tank. I never really fully experienced the original Cleito, just because I was more into RDAs, RDTAs, things like that, and I kind of shied away from tanks in general. I used the TFEA tank, and that kind of put me a little bit back on track with tanks a little bit. It's closer to an RDA or RDTA feel for me, so that was why I didn't really want to go to some of the smaller tanks, because you know I felt like I was cutting or having to cut my vaping style down a lot to accommodate the tank. But then I tried the Aspire Cleito 120, which I did do the review on my YouTube if you've checked that out, and I was thoroughly impressed. I have not stopped using that tank since you know, I purchased it. It's a great tank. I love the tank. I use it all the time. It's a phenomenal tank for me. Everybody's got their own preferences. Everybody's got their own styles. Everybody's got their own opinions as to what works for them, what doesn't. So because of that, obviously, you know, Aspire came out with this new tank, and they had a few little hypes on it that they wanted to, you know, push and advertise it for, and you know, it got people excited, it got people wanting to try it, things like that. You know, once you start making good products, people are always going to be wanting the next new thing that comes out. So I figured I'd give it a try. Like the 120, I purchased this from a local shop. It's called Torch. It's run by a really good friend of mine, John. So I definitely want to give him a shout out. He is local to the Anacortes area of Washington. If you're local, you're in the area, definitely swing by his shop, check him out. But this is the package. It's basically like the original Cleito. It's like the original Cleito 120. It's pretty much a standard Aspire Cleito package. It just basically says the name, has a quick little blurb, comes with seals replacements. It comes with a extra Delrin drip tip, and comes with an extra coil. Now, this is one of the things that I do like about this tank. That it was one thing that also comes with a warranty card too. It was one thing about the 120 that a lot of people were hoping for. The Cleito 120 basically uses the larger coils. They're the 0.16, and their sweet spot is 100 to 120 watts. Hence the Cleito 120. However, you can go below the 100 watts safely without it affecting the tank, leaking, things like that. I know there are people out there that say you can't because that's what the coil says. I vape mine regularly at 85 watts, and I've had absolutely no problems with it whatsoever. No leakage, no cloud issues, no flavor production issues, nothing. But it wasn't interchangeable with the regular Cleito coils that some people were interested in getting because it was a bigger tank. So they were like, hey, if I can use the regular Cleito coils, it gives me more room, more juice, things like that, makes it more convenient for me, which for the most part it does. However, the Cleito 120 is not compatible with the regular Cleito coils. Aspire understood that, learned from that, and changed that with this tank. So now it does take coils that are the size of the 120 coils, but it also takes regular Cleito coil styles, which is this one here. This is the 0.4, which is rated at 40 to 60 watts. And for the regular Aspire tank, this coil works phenomenal. That's the coil that most people use. Since I haven't shown it yet, let me show you the tank. That's the tank. This is the Aspire Cleito EXO, and I did get it in the rainbow, not the normal color scheme that I usually get my stuff in. I usually go black and red mainly, or black. But it was different. It was new. I figured, what the hey. Basically, it's a pretty standard looking tank for the Aspire. It basically is the same size as the Aspire Cleito tank. It's 57 millimeters tall from the top of the tip to the bottom of the post, and it is 23.5 millimeters wide on the top cap. I believe it's 12.5 millimeters from the top of the tip to the bottom of the cap as well. But it's basically, this is like an anodized steel. It is the rainbow colored. It does have a window for your fill window, so it tells you, it lets you know when you're low on juice and you need to fill. Not the easiest thing to see unless you're really staring at it, or you're looking at the light and you try to twist it around to see where the juice level is. So, you know, that kind of can be a con for some people. It is a top airflow. Now that's the one of the main differences between this tank and the regular Cleito and the Cleito 120 is that this is a dedicated top airflow, non-adjustable. I'm not sure if that was a specific point as to they wanted it to be that way, but there are some people I know that do prefer having adjustable airflow so they can play around with it, but this is non-adjustable. It is top airflow, so the air basically is going to come in through the top, come down into the channel that's set in here, go through the coil, and that's where you get your flavor and vapor production from. It is basically, I don't know if you can see it right there because of the glare, but you can see where the inner glass chamber is, and then there's the gap in between where the outer airflow is. So this all pops off as one piece. I do have juice in here. I did let it pre-soak into the large coil. There is a 0.16 coil in here that is rated between 60 and 100 watts. Now, I'm not exactly sure myself how this coil can be the size of the 120, read at a 0.16 roughly, but only be rated from 60 to 100, whereas the 120 coil is the same size, ohms at a 0.16 as well, but that's regulated at 100 to 120 watts. For me personally, mainly I assume it's just because there's more cotton and wire set up on the inside, and that's where that difference comes in. But this is the top airflow. Like I said, it is dedicated. It does not adjust at all. Now, the seal right here, this is the base of it. This cap comes off, and that's where they basically are saying that they are, for the most part, guaranteeing that it is leak proof, and that they basically state that on their website, on the packaging, everything else. They say they basically practically guarantee that it's leak proof. The seal on here is pretty solid, but by having the top air cap down and then having the airflow on top, you have a lot less worry about leakage because there's no holes on the bottom or anything like that. As long as your seals are good, this basically is going to have a compressed fit that's going to be tight enough that there's going to be no juice that leaks out. So far, I've only had this a couple of days. I haven't had anything worry about that. You know, nothing's leaked out. There's no buildup or anything in that sense. But that's basically the setup of the tank itself. Let me pop this off. Just like the Cleito and the 120. You take the cap off. It is a top fill. Now with the bigger coil in here, the 0.16, it does take up most of the room in the tank. With that coil in this tank, it does limit the amount of juice that you can put in this tank, and it takes it to about a 2 ml tank. Now, they do that so that this tank now becomes TPD compliant to ensure that, you know, it can only hold so much. If you take that coil out for people who are looking to make the tank a little bit bigger, you know, even if so that, especially if you don't vape above 60 watts, if you use the smaller coil, it changes the tank size to a 3.5 milliliter size tank, and you can vape it at lower wattages if that's what you prefer. So having the customization, so to speak, for that ability, the backwards compatibility on the coils is actually really nice. That is, to me, that's probably the biggest pro factor for this tank. Other than that, it's like I said, it's basically a standard Cleito tank. They've just changed the color, obviously. They changed the design setup, and now it's compatible with the 120 size coils and or the regular Cleito coils. However, beyond that, my main issue with this tank is that it's not for me. And like I said, this is all just a personal opinion. This is a personal vapor's preference, things like that. Everybody has a different one. I know there are reviewers out there that rave about this tank and how it's so much better, and they're impressed with that, and there are other reviewers that are not fans of it. unfortunately, myself, I am not a fan of this tank. The main reasons why is, one, the top airflow, and that's mainly just because I'm more used to bottom airflow, because for me, you feel that you get more out of it, to me. The top airflow just feels really constrictive to me. I prefer, wide open airflow, and I don't feel like I get enough out of this tank. One of the biggest cons that is on this tank for myself is that when I vape this, the juice that I use, I know for a fact how it tastes. I've done a review on the flavor. I know the flavor pretty decently. I've gotten a few bottles of the flavor, and it's always tasted consistent in everything else that I've used it in, except for this tank. Now, I know it's going to be affected by, the top airflow and things like that, but the coil is beefy enough. Like I said, it's basically equivalent to the 120 coil. It's just regulated at a lower wattage range. But between 60 and 100 watts, I've tried it at a bunch of different wattage levels between 60 and 100, and it constantly keeps the aftertaste of it for this juice keeps tasting like it's getting a scratchy burnt taste. Now, it may be the coil. I don't know for sure. I don't have another spare to use on this yet. I will try that out, and I will do an update on that if there is a big difference change and it just happens to be a bad coil. However, for the most part, for me, I'm not a fan of this tank. I really enjoy the 120. I will stick with the 120. That will be the Aspire tank that I stay with, unless, if they decide to come out with another tank, I will try that one as well. But as far as if you're looking at, cloud production, things like that, it's not a bad tank if you're not a high wattage vapor. If you're an Aspire Cleito, the original one, and you vape around 40-50 watts, stick with the regular Cleito coils. You still get a 3.5 milliliter tank. Holds a decent amount of juice, but in that sense, it still will work with what you're used to. And to me, I feel this tank is more designed for lower wattage vapors. I know they're trying to accommodate it for the higher wattages as well. For me, it just fell really short. Another thing I didn't like about it is when you vape on it, I would say for more than 10-12 minutes, and not a straight chain vape, but if you just vape on it regularly like you would any other tank, this top area gets hot really, really fast. And obviously, you're going to drain through your juice really quick. With only a 2 mil capacity, with that bigger coil in that, I mean, you're going to be filling your tank, depending on how you vape, possibly every 20 minutes, every half hour. I mean, most people carry a unicorn bottle on them, but if you're constantly filling it every half hour or so, that kind of gets really tedious, even though that it doesn't really entail a lot. The 120, yes, now I do go through that quite a bit, as I vape through that, but it's still not as fast as this, and I don't feel like I'm filling it every half hour. But again, my preference, my 2 cents. But I will vape on this just to show you what the cloud production on this looks like. This is at 70 watts, and this, like I said, this has the 0.16 coil in this, and I am vaping on Elixir number 4 from Apothecary, which I've also done a review on this flavor as well on my YouTube channel. It is a butter pecan cheesecake caramel. It's a really solid dessert flavor, which is why I was kind of disappointed with the way it tasted in this tank. But let me show you how this vapes. So like I said, it's at 70 watts. Now at 70 watts, it's not super bad. I do taste the flavor. For me, it doesn't feel as strong as it does in the 120 or on an RDA, obviously. As you can hear, the top airflow does have, the top airflow does make it sound a bit whistly, as far as more of like a raspy echo. But the cloud production is really, really solid. It's just, for this particular flavor, it just seems to be a bit muted, more out of the tank than I thought it would be. But let me take this up to 75. It's at 75 watts. Cloud production is still pretty good. Flavor, like I said, is decent. It's just not as potent as it is on other devices that I've used this on. Now, I know you may not be able to see that, but that's off of just a couple of hits that you saw, and it's already right at the top of the cotton window on the coil, and that's just on a few hits, and it's already pretty much a quarter of the way empty. So you're gonna go through juice, especially when you go up in wattage. So let me take this up to 80 right there. So obviously, because you're burning higher, you know, the clouds are going to be a little bit more thick. Tip is starting to heat up a little bit, you know, and it's a Delrin tip, so it's not meant to burn, but it is starting to get a bit warm, and obviously the juice is going to drain more on that. Now at 80 watts, I'm starting to feel that little bit of a tickle in the throat that I was telling you about. I have not had it at all on anything else that I've vaped this juice on. So, you know, that's, for me, again, that's a bit of a con for the tank itself. I tried at 85 watts. So again, cloud production is pretty solid. I will not take that away from the tank. Flavor, I just wish popped a bit more for me, as you know, I was hearing from other reviewers about how much greater the flavor is on this tank. The tip definitely has gotten warm. The tank is starting to heat up a bit as well. And the tank is almost half empty at this point, and I've taken about 5 or 6 good hits off of this. So, like I said, you're going to be filling this up more. Overall, I like the look of it. I do. It does look slick. Obviously, the color combo doesn't really work, but the design of it is nice. I'm not a fan of the top airflow just because I feel like I'm losing part of the vape, which I may or may not be, but I just prefer the bottom airflow. It just feels like I get more out of the vape. The fact that it heats up quickly, depending on how consistent you vape on it, you know, is a con for a lot of people that I know. It can heat up like that. Overall, I feel like this tank was not meant to be a high wattage tank, even though that they try to accommodate both sides of the spectrum in the vaping style. But I definitely feel, yeah, now as I hold the side of the tanks, you can definitely feel the heat. I feel like if you are an original Aspire Cleito tank user, this definitely would be a nice upgrade. It would give you a little bit more to it. It gives you, you know, a nice little boost. But if you regularly vape, you know, 70, 75, 80 watts or higher, I feel like this is kind of a step down from what you're doing. Like I said, for me personally, I will stick with the 120. That is a phenomenal tank. That is, for me, that is Aspire's, you know, #1 tank. But if you're looking for a newer tank, if you're still using some of the older style tanks and you're looking for an upgrade, the Aspire EXO is not a bad choice to use. I just feel if you are a high wattage vapor, it's just something that probably isn't going to work well for you, so that should stay, you know, for the lower wattage vapors. However, that's just me. Aspire overall still is an amazing company. They make really rock solid quality products overall in general. Definitely check them out at aspirecigs.com, and pretty much any website that sells vaping anything will pretty much sell something by Aspire. So definitely check them out. As always, guys, I'm Token Vaping. I'm here on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and Pinterest. Anything that I myself can do to help further enhance your vaping experience and make it more enjoyable for you, that's the only reason why I do this. So definitely hit me up if you have any questions, comments, concerns. If there's anything about, you know, for instance, this tank or a flavor that I reviewed, if you have a difference of an opinion, I would love to hear it. You know, I enjoy hearing everybody's preferences and styles and their versions and visions of different things. So definitely let me know. But as always, no matter what, regardless of anything else, morning, noon, or night, always truly love yourself. Vape on, vape strong. Have a good one, guys.